Today, I'll be talking about the movie The Breakfast Club. This movie is about 5 students report at 7 a.m. for all-day detention at Sherma High School in Sherma. The main characters are John, who is a very rebellious student, Andrew, who is a state champion wrestler, Allison, who is an introvert, Claire, who is beautiful and pampered, and Brian, who is a geekish intellect. All of these 5 students come from different schools, and they seem to have nothing in common. The students gather in the library where Assistant Principal Richard Vernon instructs them not to speak, not to move from their seat, nor sleep until they're released at 7 p.m. He assigns them a 1,000-word essay in which each of them must describe who you think you are. However, the students pass by the hours by talking, arguing, and at one point, smoking marijuana and getting high. This film validates Henry Giroux's idea about how society presents youth as a problem. In Giroux's article, During Cultural Studies, Youth and the Challenge of Pedagogy, he said, "In our society, youth is present only when its presence is a problem, or it's regarded as a problem. More precisely, the category youth gets mobilized in official documentary discourse in concerned or outraged editorials and feature, or in the supposedly disinterested tracts emanating from the social sciences at those times when young people make their presence felt by going out of bounds, by resisting through rituals, dressing strangely, striking bizarre attitudes, breaking rules, breaking bottles, windows, heads, issuing rhetorical challenges to the law." And this movie exactly represents youth in this way. Basically represent youth as a problem and outrageous. So, does this film accurately represent high school as I remember it, and how so? Actually, I don't think this film represents my high school in any way. Well, maybe because I didn't go to a Canadian high school. I am from Macau, and I went to a girls' Catholic school, which is very uncommon, and my school was quite academic, so students in my school are quite, diligent, and they're very talented. Most of them are very smart, and we don't really have many behavioral problem. However, I do find similarities as the movie goes on. So gradually, these characters open up to each other and reveal their deepest personal secrets. Allison is a compulsive liar. Andrew cannot easily think for himself. John comes from an abusive household. Brian was planning suicide with a flare gun due to the inability to cope with a bad grade. And Claire is a virgin who feels constant pressure from her friends to be a certain way. They also discover that they all have strained relationship with their parents, which are the key cause for the personal issues as well. So Allison's parents ignore her due to their own problem. Andrew's father constantly criticizes his effort at wrestling and pushes him as hard as possible. John's father verbally and physically abused him. Brian's helicopter parents put tremendous pressure on Brian to get a high grade at school, and Claire's parents used her to get back at each other during frequent arguments. The students realize that even with their differences, they face very similar pressures and problems. I would say that the family issues addressed in this film reminds me of some of my classmates in high school, and I'm sure it's a common thing in anywhere in the world. One thing that this film doesn't match with today's classroom is that there's no technology problem, because back in 1985 technology wasn't a huge thing. However, in today's society, every student have access to the internet, to technology. Even elementary kids these days have a smartphone. And so digital citizenship and some digital problems such as sexting or like online bullying would become prominent problems in today's classroom, which is absent in this film. Also, the topic of mental health issue is not addressed in the film. According to the report, School-Based Mental Health in Canada, approximately 85% of board-level respondents indicated they were concerned or very concerned about student mental health and or substance use. Fewer school-level respondents expressed this level of concern, 65%. Over 80% of respondents indicated that there are unmet student mental health and or substance use needs in their board of school. In other words, mental health concern and substance abuse is a very big problem in Canadian schools. Although this film has addressed the problem of smoking marijuana among students, however, it doesn't address other substance abuse such as smoking, drinking especially, which is a prevalent problem in North American schools. In conclusion, although this film is quite outdated when it comes to addressing students' problem, however, it does address that parents or students' family background are a very influential element in affecting a student's behavior. Yet it is important for the audiences to think critically when watching this film, because if we're not thinking critically, then we might very easily to consider teens as a issue without considering the reasoning behind, without thinking where they're coming from, and without thinking about how we can solve these problems. Because if we feel teens as a problem, then we will never have hope in them to make a change. And as a pre-service teacher, I think that's an attitude that we want to avoid and try to think in the more positive ways and believe in our students.